Thank you so much, Steve. And it's my great honor to introduce Hilary, our speaker today. He's the president of UNELTA, as Steve already said, in Uganda, and he leads national initiatives to enhance teacher capacity and promote inclusive quality education across Uganda. He's been working as a British Council partner and teacher trainer, supporting educators in East Africa and beyond. Through the British Council programmes like Teaching English Connects and the Prelim project, he's designed and delivered professional development for hundreds of teachers in several countries in the area, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, and he's been focusing on project-based learning, social emotional learning, and integrating environmental themes into the curriculum. So a huge range of interests. Hilary is a Fulbright alumni. He's conducted international research on inclusive education and leveraging technology in low-resource classrooms. I think he's going to talk a little bit about his research. And he's authored and contributed to numerous teacher training modules and resources, and he regularly presents at national and international forums on educational leadership, climate education, and innovative pedagogy. So I'd really like now to hand over to Hilary for his webinar.
Thank you so much, Linda. And everyone, it's a good evening from Uganda and from UNELTA. In today's webinar, we are looking at bridging inclusion in low-resource African classrooms. And part of the objectives of today's webinar will be to identify barriers, basically as teachers to recognize the challenges including class size, resources, abilities, disabilities, and gender. And at the same time, we are going to explore strategies. How can we leverage local materials, peer support, and creative practices to make our classrooms more inclusive and enjoyable? We are also going to see how best we can develop assessment. In that, I mean looking at fair and flexible ways to gauge learning for everyone, such that every learner can thrive. Next. So to begin with, as teachers, I want us to reflect on our inclusive practices in our classrooms. For instance, what teaching resources do you currently use or use more often in your classroom? Feel free to use the chat because this is an interactive webinar. Much as I'm sharing what most teachers in Uganda are doing in their classrooms to make them inclusive, we would love to hear from what other teachers in the region are also doing, such that we can learn from each other to make teaching more enjoyable and more inclusive. So what teaching resources do you currently have, or do you currently use more often in your classroom to make it inclusive? And what resources do you think you urgently need in your classroom to make it more inclusive? Feel free to use the chat such that we can see what different teachers in the region are using. Atem is saying they use VL glasses. Thank you so much. I would love to hear from, another teacher is saying visual aids like Flash and picture cards, wonderful. So let's keep the chat moving. Block letters, block numbers, games, video games, textbook, whiteboards. Okay. I'm waiting to hear someone putting up some of those local made materials, local materials that are made from our local context, because we come from diverse areas. So what are those kind of resources in your own context, in your own local context, do you use to engage your classroom to make it more inclusive? Loudspeakers, posters, videos, pictures. How rich is our environment, and how do we use it to shape our classroom environment and make it inclusive? Yeah, I love what I'm seeing. Someone is saying the student themselves, wonderful. So I think this one is from Mauritania, is saying Mauritanian crafts like basket, souvenirs, animal crafts, and riaria. the school environment, chalk. Okay, let's keep rolling. Let's keep it moving. Shall keep reading in the chat. Abubakar Sadiq Niang, how you doing from Senegal? My brother is saying Riaria. So let's keep the answers coming. The next slide. Let's keep them coming. We can learn from each other, especially. Yeah, thank you so much. And now from using those resources that we use in our own classrooms, now I come to what we understand by an inclusive kind of a classroom. Because when we talk about inclusivity, most people will think about the physical disabilities. And when we think about the physical disabilities, others will think about the invisible disabilities. And this is where I want to, first of all, understand before I dive in. As teachers in the region, feel free to share your answers in the chat for this. I want us to share with one another. A, B, C, and D. So you can tell me, for instance, in A, have you had chance to work with Braille materials for visually impaired learners, or classroom ramps or wheelchair accessibility? How about the buddy systems and peer support? Have you had chance to have that one-on-one support for invisible disabilities, e.g. autism and selective mutism? If it is for A, then you're free to put A with a tick, A with a hash. If you've never heard of it, if you're not familiar with it, of course, we are going to dive into some of these, and by the end of the webinar, we shall know how best we can use some of these into our classrooms to make them more inclusive and make learning more enjoyable for our learners and for our own careers and for our own professional development. So ABC, BC, ABC. I think people are trying to use the letters to tell me those that they are familiar with. I think D is not very common in the answers. I don't know why. Well, we are not offering those one-on-one supports for the students with invisible disabilities. A seems to be okay. I understand. So I'm starting to see some D's. So I'm happy. I'm happy that at least for all the people who are in attendance for this webinar, they're showing that at least all of us have seen either A, B, C, or D. So that means that we shared learning, at least for someone who has seen D, who has seen A. If we have seen everything as a team, if we are able to share with one another, it's good for for career growth and good for continuous professional development. For us as teachers, to learn from one another. For those who are saying CD, you can learn from the one of A. So I love what I'm seeing. I'm happy. Yeah, but of course we shall dive more into how to use some of these materials. And of course, we can go on to research some of these materials for betterment of our classrooms and to make them more inclusive. Next slide. So let's go into the reality of our classrooms. And when we look at our classrooms, like I said, that we teach in different contexts. Some of you teach in some remote kind of areas, others urban, peri-urban, depending on the location of your school. And they have different needs and they have different resources. So when we are talking about the reality of our classroom, look at the classroom at the school where you teach. And this is and you must very well understand that fostering an inclusive classroom is not an ideal, but it's a necessity. Our classrooms ought to be inclusive, because we cannot say that we are offering quality education when our classrooms are not inclusive. The moment we are not inclusive, then we are not offering quality education, and we are failing the Sustainable Development Goal 4, which is inclusive quality education. So when we look at the reality of most of our classrooms, we are faced by different challenges. Others might be opportunities. For instance, overcrowded rooms, which restrict individual attention, the large classrooms. So offering one-on-one support when your one teacher might limit, if it's a large classroom, you're limited to offer one-on-one support. Then we have limited resources in terms of textbooks, maybe low-tech tools, and of course, we can't fail to talk about the diverse abilities and languages. For instance, I can talk about Uganda. Uganda has over 61 living languages. And you can talk about multi-ethnic groups that are in Uganda. So that means that in Uganda, most regions, in every kind of a region, every district, you find people with a different local language. And with emphasis on thematic curriculum at a lower level, you'll find that if you shift, for instance, you're teaching in this area, you go to another area, you'll find students speaking a different local language. So with all those languages in one classroom, it becomes a bit tiresome for a teacher to make sure that it is inclusive. However, like we've said, it's our duty as teachers that we should make this inclusive. Then the disabilities and difficulties. And when we talk about these disabilities, we shall talk about the impairments, learning impairments, sensory, the physical disabilities, and somehow the physical needs of learners may require adaptation, like we saw the classroom ropes for those that have wheelchairs, like we saw brailles for those who are visually impaired. And then the gender bias, the stereotypes and imbalance. Sometimes they can exclude the learners. The socioeconomic factors, poverty and lack of support at home may impact learners. I can give, for instance, in most of our UNELTA workshops, we had a workshop of recent in Central Region in Lukaya, and I asked the same question. For instance, when students are sent home to, because talking about Uganda, almost 60% of the schools are privatized. They're not government. And even those that are government aided, students need to pay some tuition and some fees to support their learning at school. So, and given the economy of the country, you may find maybe some students are given a cheat. They are told to go back home and correct part of the tuition. And as that, they end up missing part of the learning, because when they are sent home to get school fees and tuition, it's not readily available home. So they take like a week or two at home. So by the time they come back, the teacher has been teaching for 2 weeks. That means the students have not learned. They have lost some content for those 2 weeks. So my question to you as teachers, how inclusive are you for those students who have been sent, who have been home for 2 weeks waiting for their for their parents to raise the tuition? In most cases, the teachers will continue teaching, but of course, we should go back and give that one-on-one peer support to these students who have been home, taking them through the work that you had already told the rest of the students, to make sure that at least they are at par with their fellows and their comrades for the work you gave when they were not available due to the socio-economic factors. So we have to be inclusive in our classrooms. We have to be empathetic to our learners. And the same, people are saying large classrooms, large classrooms, large classrooms. How best can we use what is readily available to us to bridge the gap of the large classrooms or the overcrowded classrooms? Because in some parts of Africa, like I've been to Kenya, I've been to Uganda, I've been to Tanzania, I've been to Rwanda. In some of those parts, you don't see a solution that is coming nearby to deter the overcrowded classrooms. So that means as teachers, we ought to be innovative and use what is readily available to us and counter the overcrowded classrooms and make sure that at least every child is at par with whatever we are going through in the classroom to make it inclusive. Thank you. Thank you for the answers. We shall keep the chat moving forward. Thank you. Next slide. So from all that you've put on chat. Someone is saying we can use this, grouping the learner. Thank you so much. So in all that you've put on chat, in all those barriers and challenges that you're facing in your classrooms, we ought to all agree as teachers that in resource limited settings, the most valuable assets are already present. Our learners, the environment, and our creativity. Just like I said, that we ought to be creative. So use what you have. What do we have? We have the learners, we have the environment, and we as teachers, we are creative, we are innovative. So how can we now use what we have to make our learners more inclusive? From the examples that I have given, for instance, starting with the learners, peer support and collaboration can empower learners to teach each other. Teachers can learn from each other. Just like we are learning from each other, people are putting in chat the resources, the local resources that they plan to use in their next lesson to make it inclusive. I'm also learning from what teachers are posting in chat. I ought to use some of these beautiful ideas in my next class to make it more inclusive. I'm not saying it has not been inclusive, but I can make it more inclusive, more enjoyable, because I'm learning from what teachers, different teachers from different countries in this region are posting. So we are learning from each other. This is a very good community of practice to learn from. I thank the British Council for this webinar. So the local materials, you can repurpose stones, bottle caps, leaves, and newspapers as teaching aids. For instance, in part of our workshops with UNELTA, we happen to go to Western Uganda, which is very well known for bananas. You've had Uganda being coined as the Matoke Republic. So they use those banana kind of fibers and they make local balls, they make local charts, um, they make different kind of materials to support learning in the classroom and even learning outside the classroom. Because now if you make local fiber balls, then you're supporting the extracurricular activities. So we can use these local materials around our schools, in our environment to support teaching. Date is saying bottle caps. Someone is saying water circuits. Please feel free to tell us how you use bottle caps in your classroom to make it inclusive, such that we can learn from you. Someone is saying project-based learning, think, pair, and share. Wonderful. Using models like Shashboard. Please feel free to put a bit of description on your answers such that the teachers on this webinar can learn from you, learn from me, and we learn from each other. Thank you. Keep those answers coming in the chat. Teacher creativity, we ought to, of course, adapt, innovate, and differentiate to bridge these inclusion gaps. I'm happy to see in the community poll that we had in the Telegram, most people, of course, were into the differentiated kind of learning to bridge those inclusion gaps. It's wonderful. I normally use differentiation in my classroom. And of course, the community languages, like I said, in those areas where in areas like mine, like Uganda, where you find a classroom has more than 60 students speaking 60 different languages, then you have to encourage translation and multilingual tasks to validate identities, such that students with such kind of challenges are not left behind, but they are part of your classroom, they are included, they are part, whether you're preparing assessment, they are part in your preparation, you prepare for them knowing that they exist, you don't isolate them. Thank you, keep those answers coming, but somehow try to describe some of them because many teachers are taking notes and they are willing to learn from you, and I'm happy to see those answers coming. Thank you. Next slide. So I talked about differentiation and of course multilingualism. This is part of what was in our community poll as part of bridging those gaps in inclusion in our classrooms. And I want to talk about, basically, let's start with differentiation, looking at imaging. Are you able to draw or act out concepts, label with words from from a book bank? Are you able to write simple sentences or dialogues to describe concepts, especially those with learning impairments, dyslexia, autistic students? So you have to be able to know the type of the students you have in your classrooms, such that you're able to plan your lessons well. There are very many webinars on lesson planning on the Teaching English website. I think they're going to share on the Telegram. Feel free to go there, freely available resources. I would share part of it, so you can go there, get those lesson plans. Some of them are talking about this, being able to compare and contrast ideas in a paragraph or in a mini kind of projects. Don't teach for syllabus purpose or saying I must finish maybe these 40 pages. Depending on the learner's needs, the teacher can aim to start small and aim big, writing simple sentences and dialogues to describe different contexts and then be able to build those bigger blocks and paragraphs. Then, of course, with multilingualism, we must be able to ask learners to say a word in their home language and be able to translate it to English. Then that kind of learning, you will find most of the learners learning from each other. I'm seeing, for instance, there are very many teachers from different countries. There are people from Ethiopia here. There are people from Senegal. There are people from Rwanda, almost all over Africa. And we speak our different local languages, but we are all here. We can be able to hear each other in English. So we should be able to ask learners to say a word or two in their home language, then translate, then make them feel at home, learn home, then back to class. Someone is saying, in my context, teachers are trained to speak the L1 of pupils in multilingual context. L1 can be Tamil, Hindu, Urdu, use of trans languages in our multilingual classrooms. Thank you. So welcome from South Africa. Someone is saying, okay, so thank you so much. I think it's Boho, so thank you. Then the peer translation. Invite learners to explain tasks to a partner in a shared language, kind of pair-to-pair of learners. Learners sometimes are always very happy to learn from their colleagues and their comrades and their fellow learners than the teacher. I'm not saying learners should take our spot, but in some instances, let them learn from each other. And of course, story comparison. Read a story in English, discuss its morals in local language. Feel free to have that. In Uganda, for instance, the government is trying to push having thematic curriculum from P1, that's the age of around 8, up to P4, up to the age of around 12 or 13, that learners should be able to learn everything in their local language. The only challenging part is that in different areas they speak a different language, but they are pushing for that as we transition to the English language. So thank you so much. Next slide. So one of the challenges that teachers normally face in having an inclusive kind of classroom has been assessment. And in our project that we had with British Council last year, partnering with English Language Professionals of Kenya, LPAC, the Kenyans in the chat, please feel free to say hello, and the Ugandans, of course. We are looking at how do we have that kind of inclusive assessment to bridge inclusion in our classrooms. And of course, we as teachers must understand that fair and flexible assessment focuses on the learning process, not just the product. Because if we focus on the product, then it means we are training our learners to pass exams. We are training our learners to come up with something. So the moment we don't focus on what they are doing as they are trying to climb, but we focus on whether they reach at the top. So that means we don't mind how they reach at the top. And for assessment to be inclusive, we should guide our learners. We should support our learners along the ladder of reaching to the top. And we can do this by observation. Let's capture the participation and interactions through the notes, simple notes that they take and what they do in classrooms. Portfolios, correct the samples of works over time to reveal growth. I can give an example of what one teacher gave us an example in the physical workshops we have with the English Connects project with the UNELTA, that if it's composition writing, the weekly assessment, learners are supposed to write a composition at least after a fortnight. And the teacher gets all these compositions. And for the academic term, he assesses all, and then he's able to see whether there is growth in what the learner has been trying to write. So it's something that we can do. It's doable. People are doing it. Peer assessment. You can use the 2 stars and a wish. Who knows 2 stars and a wish? Feel free to explain on the chat. To foster constructive feedback with our learners. Self-assessment. Ekua from Ghana is saying, I encourage peer assessments aside from the standard assessment techniques. Thank you. So self-assessment. Have we understood? If you have understood, put your thumb up and they say, yes, we have understood. If you've not understood, thumb down. So you understand. So you are able to track the progress of learners in your classroom. So the exit tickets that lets the learners reflect on their learning. So all these other, which technique would you like to try? Please feel free to share in the chat. Let me see the technique teachers think that they can try. Or some technique you've tried in your classroom and have not mentioned it. Someone is saying observation and peer assessment. Bekele says all, thank you. Someone says portfolio. Yeah, so we can try all these in our classrooms to make them more inclusive. Because like I said, with assessment, it should be inclusive, but we should not aim at looking at the results at the top. We should look at the steps in which this person has been at the top. Please feel free. Someone says all are important. Thumb up, thumb down. Thank you. Keep them coming. Next slide. So now, it comes to applying what you've learned. And I want us to move together here. So here is a case study. I have a primary 5 class with 45 students. 5 are struggling readers. 10 learners are dominant in Luo. Luo is a language like we can say, maybe they are dominant in Igbo, they are dominant in French, they're dominant in English. So Luo is a language in Uganda. Actually, it's not only in Uganda. We have Luo speakers in Kenya, Luo speakers in South Sudan, and Luo speakers in DRC. So you have only 10 shared textbooks among the 45 students, and the topic is weather. So the question is, identify a specific challenge from the case study. What are you likely to face as what barrier will you really address in such kind of a classroom? And of course, as you look at that, think of a resource or peer strategy. Propose a low-cost solution, such as grouping or local materials. The reason why we are saying low cost, because if I say, think of something, teachers, some of us teachers, the teachers in Uganda will always, oh, there's no money, oh, there's no, of course, money will not be enough, money will never be enough. But when it's not enough, then we utilize the local resources or the available resources, and we make sure that we get teaching done, and it is better for the students. It is inclusive, and it yields results in terms of meeting their learner needs. And how will you check understanding? In terms of the fair technique, in terms of the assessment. Someone is saying large classes and limited resources. Then what resource or peer strategy, Linda, will you use? And what kind of assessment tool would you use in that large classroom with limited? Someone is saying continuous assessment. Someone says language barrier. So what tool will you use? Wonderful. Kidan is saying, does it mean that the rest 20 students are out of the game, that they are not going to learn? Now, here is where the inclusive teachers come in to say, no, 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 they are not out of the game. They are in the game. We are going to make this classroom inclusive. And this is where the question comes in. How? Now that you have understood that if we do not cater for these 20 students, they are out of the game. How do we get them in the game? Let's keep someone is saying assessment for learning, group assessment. Let's keep those answers flowing. Next slide. And of course, as some of you are busy thinking about, oh, what are we, or how can I do, what should I do with this kind of a classroom? How do I keep these 20 students in the game? Like they told you that I'm the president of the Uganda National English Language Teachers Association, UNELTA. For the past 2-3 years, we've been partnering with the British Council. And for last year, we worked out a project, English Connects project, named Centering English Language Teaching in my local community. And in this, we are looking at teachers blogging, gender, just climate action. We partnered, of course, with the English Language Professionals Association of Kenya, ELPAC, and we trained over 200 teachers physically in 4 regions in Uganda on themes to do with climate, gender, assessment, and inclusion. And most of the examples I'm giving and all the knowledge that I'm giving is from what we got from all those physical workshops, from the teachers we worked with, teachers we talked to, the schools we visited, the learners we met on these kind of workshops, to making sure that at least learning is inclusive. We collaborated, of course, with LPAC on the project virtually, reaching more than 300 teachers through webinars. So Ugandan teachers and Kenyan teachers were able to meet virtually, like we are meeting, and share the best inclusive practices in our respective countries. And of course, teachers were able to write blogs. They were able to write articles. Most of them are online. You can feel free to put UNELTA ELPA after the webinar. UNELTA ELPAC blogs on centering ELT in my local community. We have a Facebook page with ELPAC, basically for that project centering ELT in my local community. You can take a screenshot the moment you will be able to see what different teachers in Uganda and Kenya were writing about inclusive education, bridging inclusive gaps in their classrooms, in their respective classrooms and in our respective countries. And of course, currently, we are building on this project to run another project with British Council, to run another English Connects project, which is expanding membership and impact. So we aim to strengthen our UNELTA regional chapters through communities of practice on inclusion, gender, and assessment. And we have already been to some parts of the country, training, sharing with teachers, sharing with each other, and it's helping us to create different communities of practice in those areas where we train teachers physically. We've created different communities of practice for teachers for to share their best teaching practices on inclusion, climate, gender, and assessment. So that shows you that as teachers, we should belong. We should belong to at least a community of practice to make sure that at least in that community of practice, you're able to share your best teaching practices. You're able to learn from other teachers what they are doing. Like most people have been sharing answers here, what they are doing. So you learn from them as they learn from you. And it's good for our continuous professional development as teachers to make us better and make our classrooms enjoyable, making learning enjoyable. And of course, punch education for the better development. Thank you. Next slide. So I'm seeing some questions. I will answer them later. Inclusion beyond language and level. So when we talk about inclusion beyond language and level, then we talk about disabilities and difficulties. That is using multisensory instructions and visual aids, offer extra time and flexible grouping. So I want to talk about this basically. When we talk about disabilities, like I said, I would ask the same question I normally ask on our physical workshops. How many teachers have autistic learners in their classrooms? And I'm asking this knowing that I'm talking to teachers who most of them are in African classrooms. How many have autistic learners in their classrooms? The yes or no can pop in the chat. What kind of help are we giving to these learners? And I would ask another question. How many have heard about selective mutism? I'm seeing no, no, from Bekele. Bekele should be from Ethiopia, I guess. Yes, no. How many teachers have heard about selective mutism? Because facts show, for instance, that in Uganda, 1 out of 1,000 students are people under age of 18 are selective mute. But when it comes to autism, it's almost 10 out of 100. Someone is saying not yet. I think we usually don't know if we have autistic learners unless they have been diagnosed, which is a long process. And of course, that is part of why, as teachers, we should be aware of some of these phenomena, because if we don't, then we end up misjudging our learners when they are doing our assessments in our classrooms, when they are answering part of our questions, when they are learning. We might think that they are slow learners. You might think that someone is indisciplined because you've been talking to them, they are not responding when they are selectively mute. So these are some of the things we aim to be aware of as educators, as teachers, such that the moment we are aware of something, it's not our role, of course, to diagnose, but of course, then we can tell that maybe these symptoms. Some is saying there are girls, one in second form, the other in the fourth form. Yeah, but of course, I want to put a disclaimer that they can affect both boys and girls. So it's not basically for the girls. Then of course, I leave that there because of time, but then we should dive into most of these. I've already carried out last year as part of my Fulbright Distinguished Awards in Teaching program at Indiana University of Pennsylvania in USA. I carried out a research on reducing disparities on students with selective mutism in Ugandan schools. And of course, I looked at Sub-Saharan Africa as a whole as part of my abstract. So my research is on academia. Feel free to go and read about selective mutism and autism as a growing trend in our classrooms, and you will be able to find ways on how best you can give support to the learners in our classrooms with autism and selective mutism to make learning inclusive. Thank you. Gender and identity. Let's use the gender neutral language and examples. As teachers, we should aim to ensure equal participation and be able to challenge the stereotypes in our classrooms to make sure that we have those gender responsive classrooms. That's a question that normally pops in our UNELTA workshops. How can I make my class gender responsive? And it's a question I can put out to the 68 teachers on this webinar. How is your classroom gender responsive? And how is your classroom gender responsive? Feel free to share on the chat such that we can learn from you. You might be having those best ideas on how you're making your classroom gender responsive that we can learn from you. HP is saying wonderful presentation and presenter, thank you. How best can you make your classroom gender responsive? Or is your classroom gender responsive? We all learn from each other. This is a big community of practice of African teachers. Then the socio-economic status that I shared about. Let's learn to provide no-cost materials and homework. Most teachers in part of, for instance, in part of our workshops, some teachers told us that because some teachers receive maybe small pay, so they design some learning materials and print them and they start selling them. So when you start selling some small materials to the learners, if they don't have money, then it means they will not access these learning materials. And if they don't access these learning materials, then it means that learning will not take place. You're not being inclusive. So try to provide no-cost materials and homework, pair learners for mutual support. Yeah. By doing that, you're able to counter the socioeconomic status. Choose one category and share a strategy you would share such that the teachers here can learn from you. Thank you. Next slide. So from everything that, of course, we have shared, we shall continue this discussion on our on the Telegram channel. And of course, if you're not part of our big Telegram family, a link will be shared later for you to be able to join the Telegram group. Then we can keep the discussion, the questions moving, the answers. I'm on Telegram. I'll be able to answer every question that comes up. So something that I should say as part of this is that as teachers, let's make sure to always use the quick thumbs up and thumbs up, thumbs down as part of check-in at the end of your lesson to make sure to see if our learners are following or they have understood or they are part of our lessons. It's very important, of course, most people are saying pair work, group the students, but we should aim to always assign roles in the group work to empower learners with disabilities, to empower those shy students. When a student is shy and you give that person a role of a speaker and it's a group of 10, everyone will be like, you have to talk, you have to represent us. So however shy they are, they will come to talk on behalf of their group in the classroom. You are empowering that learner to speak. Learning is inclusive. You're making that classroom jolly. Learning is becoming fun. And of course, education is taking place. Invite learners to translate key vocabulary to the class to be able to translate from their home languages then to English, such that they don't feel like they are not part of the class. In Uganda, we have this. You're teaching maybe in a central part of Uganda, Kampala. Then someone comes from, let's say, Ushenyi. They speak Runyankore as a local language. In Kampala, they speak Luganda. So someone will be quiet for all that time unless you intervene. So you have to intervene such that this learner can be able to feel in the classroom and feel home. We can repurpose the local objects in our school environment, bottle caps, stones, and whatsoever, to be able to teach counting, sorting, literacy, numeracy, and other topics that may be relevant to the resources. I'm not saying we should use stones, no. Those resources that are relevant to the topics that we are teaching in our classrooms. Let's use those resources such that teaching can take place. Instead of saying, oh, limited resources, we don't have resources. Next slide. Yeah, so feel free to follow. This webinar will be available on the Teaching English website. So feel free to use inclusive practices, follow the link for the free resources. And of course, English in a multilingual classroom. The link is there for you to follow the link and see those. They are free resources for you to use and make your teaching life very, very good. And of course, a happy teaching life. And of course, inclusive assessment, webinars. We have had webinars on inclusive assessment. We have had webinars on blogging and teaching action as UNELTA. The links are there. Christopher Liberty, UNELTA member, has had different webinars on climate action in our classrooms and integration in climate integration in English language teaching. The links are there, so feel free to go and watch those webinars. Yeah, thank you. Next slide. So I remain Hilary Bamukunda. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for making this interactive. So at this point in time, I will welcome one of the hosts so that I can take in the questions. I see I still have around 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hilary. That was so interesting and so personalized, and lots of information about what you do in Uganda. Very, very interesting. And what I really loved in that was all the chat that people were suggesting, all the ideas and sharing and learning from each other, encouraged by you. And that was excellent. We've got quite a few questions. So let's start with one here. How can I promote empathy and respect among learners from different backgrounds and abilities?
Thank you so much. Of course, empathy starts with a teacher. As a teacher, you must be empathetic. The learners learn from us. That's why in Uganda, there is a saying that we are the parents because we spend more time with these learners than the real parents. So because our academic term is normally 3 months, so that means that out of the 12 months, we spend close to 9 to 10 months with these learners on a daily basis, more hours than the parents. So the learners learn from us. It starts from us as teachers. The moment you're empathetic, the way how you talk to the learners, even when they are in discipline, even when they do wrong, the way how you reprimand them, it sends a message to other learners on how they should treat their peers.
That's a great idea, isn't it? Yeah, modeling, I think, is very, very important there. There's another question that involves parents, actually. What role can parents or local organizations play in supporting inclusion?
That's a great question. One of the best things we can do as teachers is to, first of all, self-awareness. We must be aware of these impediments in our classrooms that are stopping inclusion. And from that, we have these PTA, Parents Teachers Associations in Uganda. With PTAs, parents normally come for a meeting at school with teachers. So as teachers, we have to tell these parents what is happening. We have to make our parents aware of what's stopping inclusion in our schools, especially if the parents have to be involved. For instance, I've talked about autism and selective mutism. There is no support you're going to give to any learner if you're not working, any learner who is autistic or selectively mute without working with their parents. You must get support from their parents. Their parents must be aware of all this that is happening, and they must be willing to support. The local
That's important.
organizations are always willing to support, but how do they support? For instance, I saw some no. I saw some teachers saying they have not heard about autism. They have not maybe taught autistic learners. They have not taught selectively mute students. So if you've not, how will the local organizations support you? And of course, I'm not blaming you because diagnosing these students and assessing them is not easy. Even in the first world countries, it's not something that is easy for them. So we shall be there. We shall reach there. Let's be positive and let's yearn to learn, attend more of these webinars, aspire to inspire before you expire.
Yeah, I agree. Even in the UK, it's very, very difficult to diagnose everyone, to have time to be inclusive. This is like something we're working towards. It's not a goal that we're going to actually reach, I think. What about what low cost or no cost strategies can I use to support learners with different needs? So I know you mentioned quite a few of them. Yeah, what's your favorite no cost or low cost strategy?
I think the best no-cost strategy is, first of all, you get a paper sheet, try to understand your learners' needs. In most cases, 70% of them relate to each other. or around 80%. Most of the learners normally want the same thing, about a very few percentage. And the moment you understand the learner needs, in your wisdom, innovate how best you can feed into these learner needs. You might not do it 100%, but in trying to make sure that you achieve them, some extent, you will achieve them. So try to break down the content into pieces depending on the, of course, people were saying large classrooms, large classrooms. So if it's a large classroom, why are you giving 10 pages of notes in 1 hour? So it depends on the context of your classroom, because our classrooms are different. That's all I can say. Our classrooms are different, and it's these differences that can tell how best we can feed into them in trying to meet the learner needs.
Yeah, and I think it's almost a totally impossible job, isn't it, to meet all learners' needs all the time. But it's something we're working towards, and that's what keeps us in the profession and keeps us learning. Yeah, and I think you mentioned teacher creativity and flexibility, which I feel is very, very important here. Yeah. There's one question from the Telegram. So Blessing is forwarding everything to the Telegram group. The most important thing in inclusion is building teachers' knowledge. How do we achieve this? Because there is a lack of training in this regard.
Wonderful. I agree with you that continuous professional development is gold in Africa. It's not something we come by. But then, like I said, now that you know, what are you doing as a teacher? You should yearn for knowledge. You should look for knowledge. I would say the fact that we are all on this webinar, and in Africa, most of us should be on WhatsApp, if I'm not mistaken. And WhatsApp now has that AI-enabled business suite. So as you text people, hello, good night, feel free to text and see those how inclusive your classroom can be. Get the new concepts that are coming on board. We have these new deficiencies that are being discovered every now and then that we never heard of. Try to read about them. Where did they start? How are those countries how are the first world countries coping up with them? Very many people are doing research. Try to read those researches, the way how you read Oliver Twist and these novels. Read the research on some of these things to see how different places are trying to cope up. I'm sure by the time you're done, you will be a better teacher, because trust me or not, the government, the teacher associations, and the local partners and NGOs, they are supporting us, but they will not look for us everywhere. Thank you.
You're right, yeah. And there's lots of resources on the British Council's website, of course, the Teaching English websites. So have a look there as well. And that's free, even a course on inclusive development, yeah. I've got one last question here. How can I measure whether all the students in class are being reached and supported? Difficult question to end on.
How can I measure if different, you
How
can
can I
come in?
measure if all students in class are being reached and supported?
Oh, just like I said that inclusive assessment is not ideal. It is a necessity. So how? We always do checkups to find out how many students are attending my lesson. So if you know there are 100, how inclusive can your assessment be if you've not assessed every learner? And like I said, that assessment should be a process. So you start the lesson, you're looking at how every learner is responding to your lesson. And of course, that will tell you how best you're going to assess them. So if your assessment is part of the whole lesson, then it means as the whole lesson is moving, you're trying to see how every learner is doing towards your lesson. So you're assessing them. Don't look at the final assessment. Make that assessment continuous. Make it progressive. Okay. And you'll find out that at the end of the lesson, you've picked out every learner.
Yeah, there's a huge amount for us to do as teachers, isn't there? More all the time. So yeah, don't be a perfectionist and think you can do everything, I think. Thank you so much for answering all those questions, Hilary, and thank you everybody for all the comments in the chat. And over to Steve now to finish.
Before Steve, there was a question from someone asking that she's in Chigari. How do we have a UNELTA office in Kampala? Yes, but if you're in Chigari, get in contact with Atel. yeah, get in contact with Atel. They'll bring you to UNELTA. Thank you.
Awesome.